afternoon. We're joined by the candidates running for St. John Rothesay, and we had a great conversation this morning with candidates from London Royal, and I expect to have no less of a good conversation this afternoon. I'd like to also thank, first off, I want to thank the candidates for being here. It's a busy time for them, and I know that they have given up their time to prepare for this presentation and for these questions. And just for putting their names out there to be a candidate, they deserve our thanks and our respect. So again, thank you to those candidates for just putting your name out there, and thank you for taking respect to them. My requests to the candidates today are just two. Number one is that the political environment around Canada right now is quite hot. Let's all do our best to make sure it stays as cool as possible. Let's have a good conversation on the issues, and remember, a conversation happens. So let's have a good discussion. And number two, we'd love to hear what each party wants to do, what each party is going to do. Let's not critique the other parties. Let's have a good conversation about what you're going to be doing should you be elected to St. John's. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Carol, and I should apologize for not being there in person. Personal requirements require me to be remote. I'd like to hand it over to Carol, and she'll play the graphics. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean. Good afternoon, and welcome to this afternoon's session on Our Region Matters. My name is Carol Cunningham, and I'm the Director of Events for the St. John Region Chamber of Commerce. First, I want to thank Encore Global for their support today for providing us with the technology. Just a couple of housekeeping rules. We ask that you click on your mute button and to minimize any background noise. We also provide you with an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the session if time permits. If you have any questions, please use the chat box at the bottom of your screen. Also, thank you to each of the candidates for taking time out of their busy schedule today to speak to us and the business community. The format this morning, or this afternoon, will be to allow each of the candidates to do a presentation for an opportunity for us to hear about their vision, their platform, and plans regarding business economic development for our region. It will then be followed by a Q&A so that each of the candidates may respond. Before we begin, I would like to ask David Duplessis, CEO of the Chamber, to come forward and to begin the proceedings.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you as well to Dean and Carol. My name is David Duplessis, and I'm the CEO at the Chamber. I too would like to welcome everyone and thank the candidates for taking the time out of this busy campaign schedule to join us. You know, we're in very challenging times, and that the way that we've presented this forum this year is a little bit different than prior years. However, our terms of reference remain the same. We are a nonpartisan organization, and as such, do not favor or endorse any one party over another. This was of such importance to our founders over the last 200 years that this approach is actually embedded into our bylaws. Questions that have been received were curated by category, and the most frequent ones were selected. I do apologize that we overwhelmed some of our candidates with a volume of questions that we sent out initially that caused us to pause and say, look, this is way too much. We're going to narrow these down by context and curate them into manageable sizes. So that's what we've done for this form. We do not permit candidates to compare and contrast other party policies, and we ask that you adhere to your own policy first. Now, to select which candidate goes first, I will select from the bowl, and that candidate will then have 7 minutes to present their policy. We will then proceed to the candidate immediately to the left and keep on in that order. So now I'm going to go over and we'll select which candidate will go first. Want to pick it? And Ann McAllister will go first. Just go to the podium? Yep.
I go to the podium.
Okay. follow.
Thank you very much to the Chamber for inviting me to speak today, and it's good to see my candidate colleagues as well. So my name is Ann McAllister, and I'm running for the Green Party in St. John, Rothesay. As I listen to the news, I hear over and over again that we have a housing crisis in St. John, Rothesay, and it is indeed troubling. I hear of rent increases that are often double the previous amount, and people placed in positions of not being able to afford to keep their apartment and not knowing where they're going to go. So to me, this is a social justice issue. For the Green Party, housing is a human right. We live in a country where you could die if you're homeless in the wintertime. Therefore, a Green Party will do the following things to address this crisis. A Green Party will immediately enact a Green government will immediately enact a national moratorium on rent evictions during the pandemic and in the days to follow as well. And a Green government will institute a national rent arrears assistance program in order to help people with arrears. For the longer term, the Green Party will invest in social, cooperative, nonprofit, and supportive housing, the latter supportive housing addressing vulnerable populations who are homeless or who have mental health and addictions needs. And some numbers about that is the Green Party will build 50,000 supportive housing units over 10 years. A Green government will also build 300,000 affordable housing units over 10 years. A Green government will curb housing speculation, one of the big drivers for why rent increases have happened, by raising the tax on empty homes owned by foreign and corporate owners. A Green government will address the Indigenous housing crisis guided by Indigenous people. Too often, Indigenous people have been subject to top-down policies. We will listen to them. They will take the lead. They know what's best for them. As your Green MP, I will work with the community to build local wealth that benefits most people. St. John still struggles from high poverty rates, economic struggle and stagnation, and it's time that we considered maybe reorienting how we do business and how we live in St. John. So, as a Green MP, I would work with community members to institute something called community wealth building. And this would be based on the Preston model, which are strategies used by the City Council of Preston, UK, to leverage its anchor institutions and community partners to build community wealth in the city and region. I believe that this model is adaptable to St. John. How it would work is to encourage anchor institutions such as hospitals, post-secondary institutions, and community foundations, to name a few, to invest in the community economic development, such as real estate, that promotes local retail and affordable and supportive housing. The next step, encourage anchor institutions to procure essential goods and services from local vendors. Fill gaps in local supply chains by incubating the development of small businesses, cooperatives, and social enterprises. And finally, support the whole community. As an example, help the disadvantaged populations access employment opportunities in anchor institutions. We are also in a climate crisis as well as a pandemic crisis. But with crisis comes opportunity. So a Green government will seize the opportunities that climate change presents by guiding and leading New Brunswick and the country through a just transition to an economic future based on renewable energy and that leaves no worker behind. What that means is that workers who are likely to be displaced because they're in energy-intensive sectors or in fossil fuel sectors will be retrained and reskilled for employment in the renewable energy sector, as one example. So our goals as a green government would be to generate 100% renewable electricity by 2030, to connect interprovincial transmission lines like the Atlantic Loop with the rest of Canada, to expand storage technologies. Canada is already a leader in compressed air and thermal mass storage. Build an electrified regional transportation system, enabling, for instance, rural residents in MB to come to the regional hospitals easily. Finally, as economic activity ramps up, the federal government must resume its primary role, the role of regulator of industry and protector of the people. Too often the federal government has strayed into areas of becoming an amateur venture capitalist, and I don't think that that's where it is best serves the people. Therefore, a green government will update the National Building Code, end all federal subsidies to fossil fuel and the nuclear industry, and redirect these subsidies to renewable energy infrastructure. Deny the NB government's application to continue operating the Belledune coal-firing generating station until 2040. Phase out Point Lepreau by 2040 and replace with renewable energy. We can negotiate a power purchase agreement with Hydro-Quebec for 26% of our energy supply to provide us with a foundation and to backstop the variability of wind and solar, for example. Cancel the exemption from an environmental impact assessment for small modular nuclear reactors of 300 megawatts or less, proposed for existing sites like Point Lepreau. This denies people, groups, the chance to intervene and have input into these projects. Enforce the requirement for free, prior and informed consent for all development proposed for Indigenous land. Uphold the resolution of the Woolastook Grand Council banning the storage and transport of radioactive materials across their traditional lands. All that's required to achieve community prosperity that benefits the majority is knowledge of best practices, like the Preston model, for example, and the leadership to drive it forward. A sustainable, just recovery from COVID-19 that seizes the opportunity of the climate emergency and brings all workers with it is not only possible, but a matter of survival. To this goal, I pledge my determination and my energy. Thank you.
Pardon me. That's the timer, and there's one out there too. Okay, we're going to hear from Nicholas Pereira next from the People's Party of Canada.
Thank you so much to the St. John Chamber of Commerce for providing this platform and allowing myself with the other candidates to speak to you today. From the beginning of the pandemic, we were the only political party publicly stating all businesses are essential. If your business is putting food on your table, a roof over your head, and you're able to build your prosperity, then your business is essential. If you're hiring employees, giving them a paycheck, and more than that, a sense of purpose, belonging, and contribution to our community, then your business is essential. I have to ask why the Canadian government placed their loyalty with multinational corporations instead of giving Canadian small businesses the opportunity to set up and to step up. I live in the Lower West Side. My corner store guy had to close at 5 p.m., but we could all pile into Costco, we could all pile into Walmart. I have to ask, why were those decisions made? In my perspective, it's because, philosophically, the People's Party of Canada operates very differently. We are not for big government. We are not for more federal funding, and we are not for more government control and regulations. We believe that currently there is a savior complex in which governments are saying, we can save you. But we believe in a free market, and not that it is our job not our job as a federal government to create jobs, but rather to create the environment where you, the business owners, the Canadian entrepreneurs can be successful, and you can create jobs because you're in a free market where you can grow and expand. Poor fiscal management and reckless spending have taken us into trillions of debt. For 2019, the fiscal year ending 31st March 2020, total financial liabilities or gross debt was $2.434 trillion. That is $64,087 per capita. Look, I'm going to be honest, I freaked out too at the beginning of the pandemic, like most of us, and paid way too much for toilet paper. I stayed home, I wore the masks, and I complied. But as the evidence from the CDC and the World Health Organization, among other reputable organizations, started to release the numbers, it was clear from my perspective that the fear propaganda was efficient and it was more dangerous than the virus itself. I don't deny the medical situation we face, and I am not an anti-vaxxer. I am pro-choice and I am open, which is what I'm asking you to be. Open to the debate that possibly that this pandemic was also used to move a political agenda forward. Reimagine economic systems is the words that were used to describe our new normal. We do not believe in the new normal. We believe in the normal. Well, I'm on fire. Is that okay? I can continue? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, is it? Okay, I'm gonna keep rolling. Operating costs at this rate, 2.4 trillion in debt, and more proposals for federal funding is going to cause the rise of inflation, which we're already seeing. What does this mean for you as Canadian small businesses and entrepreneurs? Operating costs will increase. Individual purchasing power will go down. And under the current philosophy in which our governments operate, they will print more money, which they do not have, to try to stimulate the economy. As small business owners, as entrepreneurs, we know that money, wealth, and prosperity is not created by printing money, but by producing goods and services that Canadians are willing to pay for. That is what we want to do. We want to give power back to you. Right now, a vote for anybody but the People's Party of Canada is ultimately a vote for inflation and the printing of more money. Currently, we operate through open border policies. 400,000 new people coming into Canada puts pressure on our housing market. We know that the big cities are where this pressure has been for years, and now we see it spilling over into St. John Rothesay. We want to provide and maintain a sustainable immigration program of 150,000 per year, which is what my family came in 1988, which is mainly a skills-based immigration program. Some studies show that the cost to taxpayers in 2014 was roughly $5,300 per immigrant. Again, real wealth and prosperity does not come from federal funding or printing money. It's the harsh truth that we must face. We must become producers again. We must get up, go to work, contribute, and there is no better section of society that can do that than Canadian small businesses and entrepreneurs. Lastly, to bring it right home to St. John Rothesay riding, we can bring prosperity here by building the pipelines. We can stop buying foreign oil and build pipelines. I will counter act anti-oil and anti-pipeline propaganda from radical environmentalists and foreign foundations, repeal Bill C-48, which caused the cancellation of the Northern Gateway and Eagle Spirit pipeline, repeal Bill C-69. Bill C-69 makes the process of building pipelines and other major energy projects complex and difficult that it could prevent any new investments.
Time
Among
check.
other things, they bill require projects to be analyzed based on the intersection of sex and gender. I am committed to ending identity politics. An entrepreneurial program, for example, should not prop up or be allocated to one group over another. All entrepreneurs, no matter their race, their identity, their sexual orientation, should access federal programs. As an immigrant, as a visible minority, I have never been kept away from an opportunity because of my race, my religion, or my beliefs. I've only been kept away from opportunities because I personally have made bad decisions, and when I make good decisions, I get good results. I will advocate for people becoming empowered, taking personal responsibility in their life, and having the freedom to choose what happens to them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick. Okay, next we're going to hear from Wayne Long with the Liberal Party of Canada. So Wayne, if we want to try this again, and hopefully we won't get interrupted, and just when you're on a roll.
I thought my socks were too hot. Well, good afternoon to everybody watching us virtually, to my fellow competitors here, Mel, Nick, Ann, and Don. Thanks for all of us, for putting our names forward. It's not easy to run. It's not easy to put ourselves out there. But you know what? Our country is made better by debates, by discussing our differences. And yeah, we differ a lot in different ideologies and how we need to move forward. But I know we all agree on one thing. We all want to make St. John Rothesay better. We want to make St. John Rothesay stronger, and we want to make our country better. So again, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here to address you all. I got into politics in 2015 because I wanted to make a difference. I, at that time, was president and part owner of the St. John Sea Dog Hockey Club. We were just coming off a Memorial Cup win, a President's Cup championship. And, I became keenly aware of my riding of St. John Rothesay and its people, and the immense pride that the people in this beautiful riding had. But I also became keenly aware that we needed an advocate. We needed somebody strong. We needed somebody with a business background, somebody that ran, owned, and managed small business to go to Ottawa to fight for our share of federal funding, to have a strong voice in Ottawa, somebody that knew how to go up to Ottawa, negotiate, pursue projects, and close deals, and deliver. Think of the progress that St. John Rothesay has made over the last 6 years. We have tripled federal investment in the riding. This year alone, we have invested $100 million in infrastructure in St. John Rothesay alone. And let the facts speak for themselves. First federal investment in St. John Airport, $15 million. New trade school at MBCC. New field house. 2 new Coast Guard buildings. 12 new modern buses for our city. Come into the city, port expansion, waterfront development, Fundy Key development, Container Village, New Loyalist Plaza, the building of Fort Latour, the restoration of Martello Tower. We've invested millions in the city market, millions in the Imperial Theatre. We've invested over $1 million in the MBA program up at King Square. We have invested over $3 million to restore the courthouse. We will continue to invest in St. John Rothesay. We will continue to bring federal dollars here. And one of my previous jobs was with Stolt Sea Farm, a worldwide aquaculture company. And I got to travel the world, and I got to sit at some of the biggest boardrooms in the world and negotiate on behalf of my company to bring deals to close. And that's what I do. It may be unconventional at times how I work, but I have a whiteboard in my office with projects listed. And I don't stop until we deliver those projects. I'm currently working on phase 2 of the port. The application is in. We had the transportation minister here. That project is close to being delivered. We're working on the St. Vincent's Affordable Housing Project. We've developed a rapid housing initiative to fund that project. We are working with UMBSJ to find a way to fund the Integrative Health Initiative, which will be transformational for UMBSJ and for our riding. As a Liberal, I also believe that we need to deliver transformational programs that can change the lives of many. The Canada Child Benefit has lifted thousands of children in this riding out of poverty. We are moving forth with a $10 a day daycare program, which will help thousands of families in this riding. We want to continue to deliver, but also being an MP is being there when your riding needs you there the most. And have we changed our style? No. I was told in 2015, move your office out of the mall. Leave it where it is, Wayne. Why? Because it's too accessible. You don't need that many people coming in your office. I said, absolutely not. We're going to put our office in a mall. We're going to be available. We're going to be accessible. Anybody can walk in my office and see me. Everybody knows by now my partner, Jeanette Arsenal, who's in my office, who grew up in the South End, who grew up in poverty, who knows what it's like to need federal assistance and a helping hand. And we are there for our constituency. And we haven't changed our style since 2015. But the pandemic showed St. John Rothesay what it means to have an MP and an MP's office there for their constituents. We went to bat for the constituents of St. John Rothesay. We went to bat for small business in St. John Rothesay. We advocated for the wage subsidy. We advocated for commercial rent relief. We advocated for the CEBA business loan. And the way we did that was we have weekly meetings with the Chamber. We have weekly meetings with small businesses. I was a small business owner. I had to balance budgets. I had to meet payroll. I had to take risk. I know what it's like to be a small business, putting yourself out there. This riding is made of small business, and I understand what you need. I'm there for you. We were there for you. I'm going to continue every day to go to bat for you and advocate for you. And I will not leave you. I've got your backs until we are through COVID. I've got your backs until we end COVID. I've got your backs until we're fully recovered and we move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Wayne. Okay, last but not least, we're going to hear from Mel Norton, the Conservative Party of Canada.
Well, I first want to thank Deb for the thorough cleansing of all the podiums between the speakers. Thank you, Deb. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, David, everyone at the Chamber for making today's event possible. And of course, a tip of the hat to all of my fellow candidates. And I know that Don would want to be here, Don Paulin, if he were able to. He's been at all the forums and has provided the perspective from the NDP. So well done to all. Just a little bit of background about myself. I was born right here in St. John, of course, at the old General Hospital, and I grew up on the Boar's Head Road. I attended M. Gerald Teed School and Lorne Junior High, and I graduated from St. John High School, and I studied political science at UMBSJ. And then I went upriver, as we say, and studied law at UNB. But as soon as I could get my feet back to St. John, I did that, and I joined the law firm of Lawson Creamer in 2000, where I have been ever since, where I've had the good fortune of being a partner. And over the years, in addition to practicing law, I've had the good fortune of participating in some wonderful community events and volunteer groups, including the St. John Theatre Company and the Abbey St. Andrews Mixed Income Housing Project, and going way back to Festival by the Sea. And also during that time span, I had the privilege of serving as a legal officer in the Canadian Forces and serving the reserve units right here in St. John and in Prince Edward Island. And then, of course, I had the tremendous privilege of serving on your council as a councillor for Ward 3 and as mayor of the city of St. John. And I've served as the chair of WorkSafe New Brunswick and also as vice president of Imperial Theatre. I've been interested in public affairs for many years, and perhaps political campaigns going back as far as 20 years. And certainly it was a tremendous privilege to serve on council, because I learned at that table what it meant to work together to set priorities as a group, to work with labor groups on negotiations around contracts, to work with community groups around priorities and budget negotiations. And it was an experience that was focused on results and working with others, working with other levels of government, working with other stakeholders to do some of the important work that this community needed. Many will remember that St. John was the first to adopt the shared risk pension model, which gave financial stability to the city finances. Some would say saved it from bankruptcy, and certainly made it possible for pension checks to be cashed well indefinitely into the future. And that was made possible through cooperation with the bargaining groups and also with the provincial government. And then we secured the largest infrastructure funding in the history of any community in this province, the funding for clean, safe drinking water. We focused on quality of life initiatives like recreation, the repaving of Harbour Passage, and the restoration of places of pride like Queen Square. And we focused on delivering value for taxpayer dollars by improving the roads in record numbers of kilometers. And we did that all without raising taxes, and while at the same time running surplus budgets. And it's that experience that I'm hoping to put to work for this great community in Ottawa, to use that experience for St. John Rothesay as your Member of Parliament, to focus on the economy, on healthcare, and on our greatest generation, our seniors. And we have a very detailed plan to secure the future of Canada, including St. John Rothesay. It's called Canada's Recovery Plan. It is a plan that is, as I say, very detailed, but it's about the future of the people of our community, about our personal and financial and economic future and well-being. It is a plan to secure our recovery from the pandemic, a plan to get the economy back on track, to bring back jobs, to get spending under control, to tackle high prices, especially of homes, to fight inflation, which is now at a 10-year high, and get serious about mental health in Canada. And in addition, to secure our independence from other countries, from foreign countries, for the things that we need the most in an emergency. And it is based on the belief that we have to have a society where everyone can fulfill their potential, and one that is based on the values at the core of this riding, around generosity and individual talent and patriotism and a sense of community. In Canada's Recovery Plan, we have a detailed plan to secure 1 million jobs over the next year to recover from the pandemic. It will focus on the hardest hit sectors of our economy, and I think we'll talk about some of those a little later today. It will focus on made in Canada products right here in St. John Rothesay, and jobs, but not just jobs, high-paying jobs. And it will enact the toughest anti-corruption laws in the history of this country to clean up the mess in Ottawa. It will get serious about mental health. It's time that we understand that mental health is health, and we will put significant funding towards that. We will secure a strategic stockpile of essential products to secure our country in the case of a future pandemic or emergency like we faced in the last year. And last, but by no means least, we will secure the economy by balancing the budget over the next decade and get our economy growing again after what has been a slow growth period in the history of this country. Thank you for joining us all today.
Thank you, Mel. We're going to move on to the Q&A section now, and I believe that the first question will go to Nick. And throughout some of the commentaries here, we've heard a lot of thoughts about economic recovery, job creation, climate change, etc. So I'm going to open it up with a question on something that hasn't been touched upon in too much detail here, and it's about healthcare. Now, we know that healthcare transfer payments are really critical to our healthcare system, and throwing money at a problem does not necessarily fix this problem. So how do you plan to work with the province to attract more healthcare professionals and create a more sustainable system for our future? And we'll start with you, Nick, and you can answer your questions from the chair.
Sure, thank you very much. I'd like to take a different approach to healthcare than what's normally talked about by establishment politicians, which is personal responsibility. We do have a healthcare problem, and it's the fact that we eat unhealthy, we spend too much time in front of social media and Netflix, and we promote big pharma over healthy lifestyle. I truly believe if there's somebody wants to help you, you tell them the unpalatable truth, right? The truth sometimes stings. It's like Buckley's, you know, it doesn't taste good, but it works. The truth about our healthcare system and our overall health as a population is, I would like to say that healthcare should be, a target for healthcare is that it's decreasing and not increasing, because what's increasing is the health of our population. As your member of parliament, I'll be promoting real healthcare, which starts by the decisions you make when you open up your fridge.
Okay. Thank you, Nick. We're going to move down to the end now, and Wayne, if you'd like to answer this question, would you like me to repeat the question?
Sure.
Okay. Healthcare transfer payments are critical to our system. Throwing money at the problem does not necessarily fix it. How do you plan to work with the province to attract more healthcare professionals and create a more sustainable system for the future?
Well, one of the things, and thanks for the question, David, one of the things that's obviously very important is that as a federal government, we're there to support the provinces, and obviously, I think we all know that healthcare is provincial jurisdiction, but as a federal government, we are there through, the Canada Health Act and to, transfer agreements to make sure that the provinces are equipped. So we're going to do two things. We're going to invest immediately, federally, $3 million to hire 7,500 doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners across the country. An immediate $3 million investment, number one. Number two, we're going to make changes to the Canada Health Act, and we are going to directly fund mental health. We recognize that we have a crisis, certainly in St. John Rothesay and right across the country with respect to mental health. So we are going to deliver direct money. We're going to invest $5 million over the next 3 years for mental health resources, for mental health counselors, mental health support, direct funding for those that need it. And we're going to make sure that, those that need mental health care, because it's clearly, at my constituency office, we are constantly getting calls from people in the riding who are looking for mental health supports. And, it's great for us to say, well, it's not our jurisdiction, call your MLA. But listen, as a federal government, we do need to step up. We need to make sure that the provinces are equipped, with the right funding. So, two things. We're going to hire doctors, nurses, nurse practitioners right across the country, 7,500 over the next 3 years. And we're going to make changes to the Canada Health Act that federally we can be there to support those that need mental health support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mel?
Thank you very much, David, for the question. Perhaps I'll speak first of all about our party's platform piece on healthcare specifically, but I'll also try to tie it back to a local initiative that I think probably many know about, but bears repeating and bears a reminder on. In the first 100 days of a Conservative government, we will meet with the premiers of all the provinces to restore the funding that our healthcare system needs. First of all, we will deliver $60 billion over the next 10 years for the healthcare system. In spite of some American-style attack ads, we are 100% committed to a strong universal healthcare system, and in particular, support for mental health. We have a national mental health action plan that will include a suicide hotline prevention number. We will invest millions of dollars into community-based programs for those working with individuals impacted by mental health. And we'll have the largest investment in the history of our country in Indigenous mental health to address things like wait times for surgeries, the family doctor need, as well as keeping our graduates from nursing and physician programs in New Brunswick. There are currently 45,000 people in New Brunswick on a wait list for a family doctor, and between 20 and 25% of our population are 65 years of age or older. And one of the tools we have is supporting the New Brunswick Medical Education Foundation. I had the chance to meet with Darren McLeod of that foundation to keep our graduates right here, and that's the kind of initiative that a federal government can certainly stand beside and support.
Thank you, Mel. Now, last but not least, we'll move over and hear from Anne.
Thank you very much, David. The Green Party, a Green government, would, first of all, re-examine the healthcare formula for transfers. We think, and I agree, that the health transfers should be based on demographics, and they should be based on the real health needs of the population of the province. That in New Brunswick's case, we have a large proportion of seniors, I believe one of the highest percentages in Canada. And seniors are, through no fault of their own, heavier users of the healthcare system. That would argue that perhaps transfer payments need to be increased to New Brunswick. Currently, they are based on the GDP, which has been inherited from about a decade ago. And we think that that's inadequate. The other proposal that a Green government would put in place would be collaborative community health care centers. And these are clinics where you have a number of doctors, nurses, a nutritionist, mental health counselor, youth mental health counselor, dietitians, occupational physiotherapists. It's like full service medical care for the community. This has the advantage of, for instance, let's say I can't see my family doctor right away. I have an emergency, I call, I want to see my doctor, but she's booked up. So I can see another doctor who has space for me. The physicians collaborate, they share the records, they care for the patients together, so I'm not missing out on anything. To me, this is a way to provide primary health care very effectively to a larger proportion of the population than is possible under the current billing system.
Thank you. We have a time check there. Thank you, everyone. Okay, the next question that we're going to ask is a little into the weeds about economic recovery. Now, we've heard someone mention, and we very much agree with this at the Chamber, that governments are not in the job of creating jobs. They have to create the environment that will allow us to create jobs. So what are 3 specific things that your party will do to improve job creation in the St. John region? And we're going to start with Wayne this time.
David, thanks for the question.
And I
again.
remind you, if you want to talk to the camera, to the audience.
Okay, I thought it was like an Oprah
Oh yeah,
Winfrey
no,
talk
otherwise
show.
they all see our side.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
Well, listen, thanks for the question.
Yeah.
And to your point, government is there to set the table, to create the economic stimulus for jobs and for economic growth. So number 1, we're going to invest in infrastructure. Look at the investment in infrastructure that we have made in St. John and Rothesay, even over the past year. I won't go back to 2015. Look at the $40 million infrastructure announcement that we did for water and sewer in Uptown St. John. Look at the waterfront infrastructure announcements we made for Fundy Quay, the Coast Guard, Container Village, redoing of our boardwalk. Infrastructure is key for us to spur economic activity, for sure. Number two, we're going to invest in economic stimulus, like we, as a federal government, invested $60 million in SMR technology. We have two wonderful companies right here in St. John, ARC and Moltex. We invested $60 million last year to spur that industry. That industry alone could create 10,000 jobs for Southern New Brunswick over the next 10 to 15 years. So, as government, we need to invest in businesses. We need to invest in places like SMRs, that technology. We invested in the port. Anyone that looks at the West Side Terminal sees major infrastructure investment right before your eyes. You can see the cranes, you can see the cement walls going up. We are close to investing in phase 2 of the port. Again, we had Minister Omaro Gabra here 4 months ago in meetings with the port. The application is in. We are close to announcing phase 2 for that. We've invested with the City of St. John in rebuilding our seawall so we can have economic development on our waterfront. We are working in investing in infrastructure with the City of St. John's engineering department to have a heat exchange system to heat our buildings and drive our carbon footprint down. We've invested $10 million to the town of Rothesay infrastructure for their wastewater treatment plant, the largest federal infrastructure investment in Rothesay in the past 30 years. So we need to invest. That will create jobs.
Thank you, Wayne. Okay, our next candidate is Mel.
Thank you very much, David. Canada has the only shrinking economy in the G7. The only economy in the G7 that is shrinking is in our country. And so to address this, in our plan to secure the future, we have set it as a goal and a priority to make this country the best place to invest and build a business. It parallels the kinds of goals that the Chamber has. And to do that, we have 4 major initiatives. We have the Canada Job Surge Plan. We will pay up to 50% of the salary of new hires for 6 months following the wind-up of the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy. Number 2, we will implement the Canada Investment Accelerator to get companies to spend money and create jobs by providing a 5% investment tax credit for any capital investment in 2022 and 2023, with the first $25,000 being refundable for small businesses. We will implement the Rebuild Main Street tax credit. And that is a 25% tax credit on amounts up to $100,000 that Canadians personally invest in small businesses like the ones right here in St. John Rothesay over the next 2 years to get money flowing onto the Main Street, into Main Street businesses and create jobs. And fourth, we will implement the Main Street Business Loan. That is, the federal government will provide loans of up to $200,000 to help small and medium businesses in hospitality, retail, and tourism, help them get back on their feet, and up to 25% of that will be forgiven. We want to have made in Canada products made right here in St. John Rothesay. We want to have great jobs, and not only great jobs, but great paying jobs. And these 4 major initiatives are keys to do that.
Thank you, Mel. Okay, now we'll move on to Anne with the Green Party of Canada. Anne, what are your thoughts on creating jobs?
I see tremendous potential in building community wealth, as I talked about in my statement, by leveraging the power and the economic influence of our anchor institutions to invest in our community. What we have found with the way the economy has trended is that manufacturing has fallen, service sector jobs have risen. And so communities can increasingly look to their anchor institutions to invest in the community. by such things as investing with their pension plans in local projects. For instance, perhaps they would fund a cooperative housing project or an affordable housing project. So I think that this is a great untapped area of potential. Another area of potential is the energy efficiency and home retrofits side. Energy efficiency is the low-hanging fruit for getting our carbon emissions under control. And so, doing a deep retrofit of our entire building stock that needs it would create thousands of good-paying trades jobs all over the province, as compared to the development of small modular nuclear reactors, which would create high-paying jobs but concentrated in one small part of the province, whereas these would be all over the province. And the transition to a green energy future, the building of renewable energy infrastructure. We could put up windmills and utility-scale solar panels in 1 or 2 building seasons and already begin to draw down our emissions, whereas with small modular nuclear reactors, they will not be ready until the mid-2030s, if ever, because these technologies are in a very preliminary stage of development and only exist on paper, and they will be prohibitively expensive, too late to help us with the worst effects of climate change, and leave us with a dangerous and permanent legacy of toxic radioactive waste and the financial liability of funding its safekeeping.
Thank you. Okay. Last but not least, Nick, your thoughts on economic recovery and economic jobs for our region.
Thank you very much, David. As I said, we're the only party right now advocating to build the pipelines. Canada currently spends millions of dollars every single day buying oil from foreign investors. By opening up our pipelines, we're going to bring prosperity and jobs to our region. And there's the spin-off business that comes from that. The service industry and other industries get to flourish when we support oil and gas. While anybody can get behind protecting our environment, the reality of our world right now is we're still heavily dependent on oil and gas, and there's actually some studies show that the demand is still going up. Because even to invest in other technologies, they still have to use oil and gas to power things and to make things happen. Our dependency on oil and gas is incredibly important, and by stifling our Canadian oil and gas, we've stifled our own economy. We spend money with other foreign countries who then don't have as good regulations as us, who are human rights violators. We can do it safer, we can do it better, and as we become more prosperous because of opening up our pipelines, more jobs can be created. Secondly, we'll stop investing in foreign projects overseas, such as abortion clinics in Africa, 1.4 billion a year, and bring that money back home and invest into Canadian small businesses and entrepreneurial programs, which everybody can access. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, for the next question, I believe we go to Mel. Now, this is an area that has been very, very top of mind, particularly in our region, and we have child poverty, we have housing issues. And, you know, it involves a lot of cooperation between municipal, federal, and provincial governments as well. So knowing that this is an issue in our region, how do you plan to stimulate investment in the private sector to promote growth for affordable housing? Part B, do you have plans for rent controls? And part C, are you going to tax the proceeds from a home sale, even if it's the primary residence?
Thank you very much, David. Let me first address the last part of your question. And a Conservative government is never going to tax the sale of the proceeds from your primary residence. That is never going to happen under a Conservative government. For the last 5 years, CRA has been collecting and requiring data on home sales and home sale prices, and one only wonders what the intention is with the collection of that data over the last 5 years. First of all, or I guess second of all, going back to the first part of your question, around the supply of housing. We have a crisis around the supply of housing in this country, and it applies here as well. And we plan to build 1 million new homes in the next 3 years. Specifically to do that, we will work with cities so that cities and towns like St. John and Rothesay who receive federal infrastructure funding, that funding will be tied directly to the development of more housing, and particularly more housing along transit routes. We will also ban the purchase of homes by foreign investors, so to reduce the prices and take away that piece that is inflating prices. The federal government will release 15% of its own property in the country, some 5,500 properties, for the development of residential housing. We'll make it easier to get a mortgage, and we will provide specific tax incentives to developers, Canadian developers, who want to develop multi-unit residential housing. We have to make sure that we deliver on things like St. Vincent's High School. That kind of project has to be done. The affordability issue is something that has come about in the last few years, and we have to address it.
Thank you. Next on to Anne. Again, would you like me to read it again?
Would you please?
Okay. Affordable housing is an issue in our region. How do you plan to stimulate investment in the private sector to promote growth? Do you have plans for rent controls? And are you going to tax the proceeds from a home sale, even if it's in primary residence?
Thank you, David. So regarding affordable housing, a Green government would move, let me just back up for a minute. We have a crisis in affordable market housing, and that crisis is that affordable market housing is disappearing as absentee landlords and investors buy up these properties, raise the rents, and either renovate or simply put the tenants out. And this is allowed. This is perfectly legal in New Brunswick. And we have a provincial government that has done nothing to correct this injustice, and it is an injustice. So we, a Green government, would invest in social, cooperative, affordable, nonprofit market, as opposed to market housing. And I realize that has the consequences of moving housing out of the market, but that's just primarily what is intended, because the market has not served particularly low and medium income people well. And so to depend on the market is to consign these people to extremely difficult circumstances and perhaps even homelessness. So we would put our investment in that sector. As for the second one, David, which was? Rent control. Yes, we in the Green Party would implement rent and vacancy controls. And as for the third one, which is tax on the sale of your principal residence, I confess I know nothing about taxation, especially property taxation. But I pledge that if that issue came across my desk, I would be researching it, finding out everything I could, and coming to a reasoned decision based on the evidence. I know in my heart of hearts that if I were selling my home, I would not like to pay tax on my home, but I would need to study it in order to make a decision based on reason as opposed to my own emotion.
Thank you. Again, over to you, Nick.
Sure, thank you. A People's Party of Canada government and party, as a party, we operate very different from an ideological perspective. We believe in freedom, personal rights, fairness, and respect. When it comes to taxing people for selling on their home, absolutely not. We are principally for less tax and less federal involvement. We are the only party saying that we will reduce federal power, and we believe that government is better when it's operated closer to the people. If the provinces want to impose a rent freeze, then we will not stop them from doing that. We will allow provinces to make the decision that they need to make for the betterment of their people. That's what we want to do, is stop allowing the federal government to get involved in all of these things. Ottawa cannot solve the problems of St. John Rothesay solely, so we need to get out of the way. When it comes to housing, I've already addressed that there's an immigration issue to this, or an angle to this that's not really talked about. By reducing our immigration to sustainable immigration, we reduce we reduce and cool the market, which allows St. Johners to get up on their feet and to make adjustments as needed. Thank you.
Down to Wayne.
Thanks for the question, David. Just a point of clarity, you can't use federal infrastructure dollars for housing. Housing is done through bilateral agreements with the province. And certainly, a frustration I have is to get the province to spend housing dollars. So what can we do federally to help in that? We've created 2 direct federal funding options for cities, municipalities, towns, and developers. One is called the Rapid Housing Initiative. Direct federal money for projects like St. Vincent's. We're going to double the Rapid Housing Initiative. It's a way for us to not get around the province so much. The programs are stackable, but it's a way for us to federally fund great projects like the St. Vincent's project in St. John. That application is in, it's being reviewed. That project, as sure as I'm sitting here, is going to happen through the Rapid Housing Initiative. Secondly, the Federal Co-Investment Fund. Our government has pledged to double the Federal Co-Investment Fund, which is delivering currently funding for projects like the Wellington project we see going up in Union Street, the Victoria Street project in the Old North End. Again, another direct way for us federally to help proponents get housing. Do we have an affordable housing crisis in St. John Rothesay? Absolutely. Is there a lack of affordable housing in St. John? Absolutely. Through the federal government, these programs will help alleviate that through developers. Federal government wants people to own homes. So we propose, and we will implement, a $40,000 tax-free savings account for those who are saving for their first home. We're going to increase the tax deduction from $5,000 to $10,000 for your down payment. We are going to come up with a rent-to-own program. We're investing $3 billion in a rent-to-own program, which will help young families rent to own. And also, with respect to rent control and spiraling rent, it is out of control. We are going to ban rent evictions. And let me be very clear. Let me be crystal clear. A Liberal government will not tax the proceeds of any sale of your home. Straight, full stop. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to the next question. And this is a little bit of changing gears here. Now, the disabled population are very underrepresented, not only in government, but in the workforce in general. In each platform that you've talked about, buried deeply in there, there's talk about increasing the disability tax credits. But these credits mean nothing at all if the disabled do not have an income. What will each party specifically do to allow someone who's disabled to be able to enter the workforce and earn a wage that will allow them to contribute as well as to live? And now we go to Anne for this question first.
Thank you, David. The first thing a Green government would do would be to institute a guaranteed livable income. This is a base amount of money. It's at the subsistence level, but it is always there and prevents a person from falling into destitution. It would provide people with disabilities with this foundational floor below which they would not fall, and alleviate some of the terrible stress that comes from receiving pensions or payments that are just simply not adequate to cover the cost of living or enable participation in society. Another key is accessibility. A Green government would invest in accessible, affordable public transportation with the goal of electrifying it to bring down emissions. The third thing that a Green government would do is invest in programs and networking opportunities, job training, skilling, so that disabled people would be able to skill up, become educated, enter the job market, with eventually the goal of free tuition, although in the short term, capping student debt at $10,000, it becomes a lot more accessible for a disabled person to further their education. So rather than one solution, we see it as a basket of conditions that are created to enable disabled people to participate in life and in the workforce.
Thank you, Anne. Now we'll hear from Nick.
Sure, thank you very much. The immediate challenge when we say, what are you going to do for disabled people, is that's a huge, it's a huge category, meaning disabled people, there's a lot of spectrum, let's say, to work with. So I think this is something that has to be looked at more at a local level so that we can get personal instead of impersonal about it. Ottawa just throwing more money that they don't have, saying, hey, we'll help it by giving you money. It's like, maybe that's possible, but first let's get our deficits under order, and then let's look at the programs and what type of people we're talking about. I don't believe in just throwing money at people, because money in itself doesn't solve problems. The human spirit as a core needs to feel valued, to have meaning in our life, to get up and to contribute. To give somebody, let's say, a universal basic income and say, there you go, now you can put a roof over your head, doesn't give incentive to get up and get working. And I think that disabled people, if they're able to work and to contribute, perhaps we can look at programs where we give incentive to small business owners, Canadian entrepreneurs, to hire some disabled folks that are capable of doing the jobs that you need done. I think there can be a lot of partnership opportunities between the government and small businesses and Canadian businesses to welcome folks into those areas. Now, if somebody is unable to participate at that level, Canada has never left anybody out on the street, and a People's Party of Canada government won't either. We will make sure that these folks have good housing, they're set up, and we can still look at opportunities as how they participate fully in society. And that way they don't just have a sense of material security, but they have a sense of value, which is what is needed to get people to get up and contribute overall to a country and society. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Back down to Wayne now.
David, thank you. I have the privilege of sitting on a national committee that studies and develops programs for persons with disabilities. It's called HUMA. And what we will implement as a government is called the Canada Disability Benefit. You are absolutely right. Tax credits do no good if you don't have any income or make minimal income. So we will implement the Canada Disability Benefit for those. It'll be much like the GIS, which is an add-on for those seniors who need the extra support. Remember that, the Canada Disability Benefit. Also, I was part of government that brought in Bill C-81, which basically breaks down barriers for people with disabilities. Federally regulated industries now have to comply to allow access for persons with disabilities. Persons with disabilities, by a high percent, live in poverty, don't have jobs, suffer from mental health. So as a government, we need to be there to support them. We need to be there to open up doors for them, not build walls and break down barriers. And I know with the Canada Disability Benefit, we can do that. Thank you.
On to now, Mel.
Thank you, David. Within Canada's recovery plan, our party's platform, is specific acknowledgement that work has to pay. And we live in a country where 1 in 5 Canadians lives with a disability, and they absolutely need our support to live full lives and participate fully in the workforce. A disproportionate number of disabled Canadians are working part-time for low wages. And our platform, Canada's recovery plan, has a number of specific initiatives to assist with this. First of all, we will double the disability supplement in the Canada Workers Benefit. We will also double the Canada Workers Benefit itself. That will help roughly 3.5 million families. We will also overhaul the disability support benefit system so that we fix the issue of individuals working but losing more in benefits than what they earn in wages. That should never happen and should never have happened. We will add $80 million to the Enabling Accessibility Fund, and we will also reduce the hours that one requires to qualify for a disability tax credit from 14 to 10, which will also make it easier for individuals to qualify for a registered disability savings plan.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we've got one question left, and I think this is a good one to wrap everyone up. Now, Carol, who goes next? Nick. So the last question is, what is your party's plan to balance the budget in a realistic time frame?
Awesome, thank you very much. We're the only party saying that we can balance the budget in 4 years. If you don't think that's realistic, the Liberal government, not this Liberal government, but under Jean Chrétien, was able to do something very similar. Of course, we're in a bigger deficit now. We spend billions on overseas projects. We will pull out of the UN Accord and stop these crazy obligations towards the UN, which will save us billions. We will defund the CBC, so that's over $1 billion back into Canadian taxpayer money. We will be able to take a look at again, with all these foreign investments, foreign projects, government projects into different identity groups as opposed into building Canadian identity. We will look at all of these things, cut funding to these things, reallocate, get our deficit under control, bring us back to a zero inflation. And then in 4 years, once we have a surplus, then we will talk about operating once again, investing from the federal level. But right now, it's the unfortunate truth that we're in. We need to pull back and cut these agreements so that we can get our deficit and our budget balanced, and we can stop run away from inflation from happening, which we are on track to.
Thank you. Okay, moving down to the end down here to Wayne.
David, thank you for the question. Nobody can look anybody in the eye out there and tell you when they're going to balance a budget. Don't buy into that. Canada right now is one of the strongest economic performers in the G7. Its debt to GDP ratio is the strongest in the G7. Our economy just added 90,000 jobs back last month. We have recovered over 90% of the jobs lost through COVID. 90% of the jobs, think about that, compared to the United States, which is at 72%. We need to invest in our recovery. We need to invest in our economy. And you don't rebuild and build economic stimulus and economic prosperity by regression, by austerity, by trickle-down economics. You invest when investment is needed. I was a small business owner. I absolutely understand the need to strategically invest in your economy, to grow your economy, to build a more prosperous economy for all Canadians. Thank you.
On to Mel.
Thank you, David. We are the only shrinking economy in the G7. Canada's economy is shrinking. No other G7 country is experiencing this. Inflation is at a 10-year high, and this has come about because of unfocused spending without a plan. We cannot continue to spend and accumulate debt and hike taxes. That is unsustainable, and it's leading us exactly where we're at with a shrinking economy. Canada's recovery plan has a detailed strategy to address this. We will have a responsible and measured approach to balancing the budget over the course of the next decade. We'll run a disciplined government that limits the growth of future spending, and we will not make any cuts. We'll maintain the current federal spending commitments for public programs in 2022 and 2023, and reduce the deficit by 85% over the next 5 years, from 168 billion currently to below 25 billion in 2025-2026. And this strategy all assumes zero economic growth, but we also have a strategy to grow the economy at the same time. I referenced earlier the Canada Job Surge Plan to grow 1 million jobs in the next year. We will implement an ultra-competitive tax rate for innovation incentives and for advanced research companies that want to set up in Canada. We will overhaul the tax and regulatory system to make this the best place in the world to invest and build a business. We'll provide financing and investment capital for small businesses, as I mentioned, and we will invest in world-class infrastructure, especially transit and broadband.
Thank you. Now over to Anne.
A green government would seize the economic opportunities presented by the climate crisis. It's a crisis, but it is also a great opportunity. To do that, we would end subsidies to oil, gas, coal, and nuclear, and redirect those funds to building renewable energy infrastructure, efficiency, storage, and artificial intelligence to integrate interprovincial connections. This is a growth opportunity, one of the few growth opportunities that actually exists on a finite planet, where talk of growth, growth, growth is misleading. But this is a sector where there is growth potential and where we have to grow it fast in order to meet our climate obligations by 2030.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes our St. John Region Matters Forum, and I'd now like to hand it over to Dean Mullen, our chair, who's going to wrap it up and give closing remarks via Zoom. Over to you, Dean. There you are.
There we go, technical difficulties. Couldn't unmute myself. I'd like to thank, on behalf of the Chamber and its members, the candidates for giving up their time this afternoon and having this conversation with us. It was very informative. It allowed us to have a clear conversation with them and allow them to explain and to give us their positions on various questions that were presented. I'd like to thank everybody that was listened in and provided questions. Because without you, there's no point in doing what we're doing today. So thank you for being here, being involved. We invite you to the session tomorrow for the last session. But for today, again, thank you for all the candidates. Thank you to all candidates for putting their name forward, because it's not easy, and we as a society need to thank you for doing that. So with that, have a great day, and hopefully see you. Thank you. Bye.